Where have affordable apartments gone? Long time passing. Where have affordable apartments gone? Long time ago. Where will working people live? Long time passing. Where will working people live? Where can they go? They will end up on the street. Big increases they can't meet. When will you ever learn? When will you ever learn?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kristal Hart, and today we are in Lower Manhattan at a public hearing addressing rent increases for New York City rent-stabilized and rent-controlled apartments. Present is the Rent Guidelines Board, landlords, tenants, and politicians all voicing their opinions. The NYC Rent Guidelines Board proposed increases for New York City rent-stabilized apartments between 3.25% to 6.25% for one-year leases and 5% to 9.5% for two-year leases. The final vote will be Thursday, June 20th, 2013 at the Great Hall at Cooper Union, 7 East 7th Street, starting at 5:30 p.m.
I'm Jack Freund, F-R-E-U-N-D. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Rent Stabilization Association, which is the largest trade association in New York representing owners of rent-regulated property. We represent approximately 25,000 owners and managers who are responsible for about 1 million units of rent-stabilized housing in New York. We're here today to ask for rent increases of 7% for a one-year lease, 11% for a two-year lease, and minimum dollar adjustments of $70 and $110 for rents that are below $1,000. Because those low rents in the city, the $600, $700, $800 rents, are just too damn low. They are not enough to be able to enable owners to pay their real estate taxes, pay their water and sewer charges, maintain their buildings. And in maintaining their buildings, our owners are hiring local labor, they're creating jobs, they're creating multiplier effects that drive the economy of the city. If owners can't get the increases they need to pay their real estate taxes, New York City will have to lay off policemen, firemen, sanitation workers, because it's the property taxes the property owners pay to the city that keeps the city running. And because those taxes and water and sewer charges keep rising, that is why we're here looking for rent increases to keep those buildings going.
Okay, and what about your basic tenant and the fact that a lot of our jobs here aren't giving us, the raise? We may only be getting a 2% raise. How does that fit into the equation?
Well, this board has only increased rents on an average of 3% a year. That's why there are so few tenants testifying here today. Most tenants understand that prices go up. They have to pay more for gas. They have to pay more for food. They also have to pay more for housing because the costs of providing housing are also going up. So most tenants understand that, and they're able to pay a moderate rent increase, and that's what we're asking for here in order to maintain their housing in good condition.
For the record, the Rent Guidelines Board only scheduled one public hearing before their final vote, which is Thursday, June 20th. It was held in Manhattan at 10 a.m., making it difficult for working people to attend, especially those in the outer boroughs.
I also need to note it is deeply regrettable that the board has coupled its proposed rent hike with a complete failure to engage the people most affected by its decision. By not holding a single hearing in the outer boroughs, the board has marginalized the voices of more than 700,000 renters who face the prospect of higher rents. The board's solitary hearing in Lower Manhattan is not just an inconvenience, it's an outright failure of democracy.
My name is Larry Wood. I work as a community organizer at Goddard Riverside Community Center. It's a settlement house on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I'm here today at the Rent Guidelines Board. They're taking public testimony today from landlords and tenants about rent increases. Next week, the Rent Guidelines Board will vote on potential rent increases for rent-regulated tenants in New York City. One of the dynamics, which will be a little different than this year than prior years, is tenants and landlords are arguing for provisos which are certain conditions that would apply before a landlord could take a rent increase. Next week, the tenant reps will, instead of just proposing a zero increase, which traditionally gets voted down 7-2, and then landlords propose a ridiculously high increase that gets voted down 7-2, the tenant reps are going to propose a modest increase because there are some landlords who do need the rental income. But in many buildings managed by landlords, they're making a great rate of return, and a rent increase would be warranted for those remaining rent-stabilized tenants. And what kind of buildings would these be? There are buildings that have significant numbers of deregulated units. The landlord they're no longer rent regulated, they're getting market rent. My building on the Upper West Side, a landlord's getting close to $4,000 a month for some of the units that were formerly rent regulated. So in these instances, the landlords are making a great rate of return, and there could be a rent freeze for those remaining tenants in buildings like that. So you'll hear a proposal for a low guideline increase accompanied by provisos that says if the landlord is withholding units from the rental market, they don't get a rent increase, or if they have significant numbers of deregulated units and making a lot of market rate rentals, they don't warrant a rent increase. Landlords have made a similar argument that buildings that have a lot of low rents, rents under $1,000, they've argued for a supplemental rent increase or a higher increase because of having a low rent roll. So tenants are saying where you have really high rent rolls and landlords are making a great rate of return, they should be a rent freeze in those buildings. I think it's a big frustration for landlords and tenants that they do a one-size-fits-all rent increase. And we really need to open the books. You have to look at the economics of each building to determine whether an increase is warranted or not. And there's provisos. It's a tool the Rent Guidelines Board can use to make some differentiation between the buildings, where some buildings a rent increase might be warranted, and many buildings it's not. So it's very important for tenants to come out next week at the Rent Guidelines Board on the 20th down at Cooper Union and listen to the Rent Guideline Board and the deliberation that goes on. Thank you.
And tell us some of the difficulties of being a landlord in today's climate here in the city.
Every year it gets progressively worse. Now with climate change and the onset of hurricanes coming up the East Coast, we are going to be faced with that, shoring up buildings, which basically we have never been prepared for hurricanes, rezoning. Another issue that's coming up is our landmarking of these buildings that house New York. Landmarking will increase cost because to work on a landmark building is more expensive than a non-landmark building. So I can see that pressuring the tenants eventually. Another issue is just overall burdens coming down from the city of New York with the increase in property taxes and water. This is why we always need the increases. If we can get a freeze at the top, we can freeze down at the bottom. But we have to pay Mayor Bloomberg his money, we have to pay DEP their money, and we have to sustain a roof over New York. We are the backbone of New York economy, the landlords. If we do not participate in doing this job, New York would have a greater homeless population than we do now. We are an essential part of the equation, and we need to get that increase so we can continue to maintain a fairly decent housing for these individuals.
And how much of an increase would you like?
The increased scale in which they're proposing this year, as usual, as every year, is inadequate. I'm going to go and I'm going to say honestly, especially for my owners over in Zone A and Zone B who house New Yorkers, we need a higher scale this year. It's not enough. It's not going to be enough. We have not gotten really increases that reflect the property taxes, the water, and don't talk about the oil. The number 2 heating oil cost is out of control. Natural gas is not much better. Don't let them fool you, okay? Energy costs are ridiculous, and that drives up overall operational costs. These are the facts. These are just what it is.
And what about the tenant?
The tenants are, of course, hurting. With the economy, with the job situation, it's very, very difficult for them. Okay, a lot of their money's coming in goes to rent. I have a senior citizen tenant, and she had me in a budget meeting for almost 2 hours in the apartment, and she showed me her Social Security award letter, and that whole Social Security went to me. She was living off her pension. Okay, I mean, in all conscience, fair is fair. Okay, it is very hard for them, and it's very hard for me. And actually, we're in the same boat. We're really technically in the same boat. Now DHCR wants to dictate the preferential rents. I offer preferential rents. Now they're putting stipulations on that. The design is coming to fruition. The very rich and the very poor. That's all that would be left in the city of New York. It is a design plan, and anyone living in the city today can see it.
What type of increase are you looking for?
Maybe double, maybe triple, if possible, but I'm sure that this rent guideline cannot go that high. Cannot go. Will be big argument June 20 when become time for final votes. And God know better that didn't help even double. That's a small income. Landlord make if he want to receive more money, major capital improvement definitely, which is very hard to repair important point of the building, which is entire renovation for the building.
Where's your building at?
In Staten Island.
Staten Island. And what's the medium rent there?
600-700. Very hard in poor neighborhoods to grow too much.
New York City at this point is becoming a tale of two cities. Wall Street is hitting record highs in the number of millionaires, and multi-millionaire dollar penthouses have soared over the last decade. Working people face a very different story. Nearly half of the city is living at or dangerously close to the poverty level. A third of New Yorkers spend at least half of their incomes on rent. And even as the economy has deteriorated for working people, affordable housing has become scarcer. Approximately 120,000 rent-stabilized apartments have been lost since 2004, virtually erasing any gains we've made building new affordable homes. We live in one of the worst economic times since the Great Depression. Unemployment is above 8%. Wages are stagnant, the cost of living keeps increasing, and middle and low-income families are struggling to make ends meet. We cannot deepen this inequality any further. Economic inequality is the challenge of our time, and it is a problem this board can help alleviate through its decisions.
The final vote will be Thursday, June 20th, 2013 at the Great Hall at Cooper Union, 7 East 7th Street, starting at 5:30 p.m. I'm Kristal Hart reporting from Lower Manhattan. Hope you've enjoyed the show, and thanks for watching.
Where have affordable apartments gone?